Writing the West. Stories and poems by Rick Steber. Read by Michael Messner and friends. The Pet Wapiti. Lucy Gould was thrilled when her brothers returned from a trip into the Coast Range with a baby bull elk. She recalled,
"I will never forget how little the creature was, so spindly, so sleek, so pretty. We fed it cow's milk from a bottle until it was strong enough to suck one of our cows, one that would accept him. The orphan calf adjusted to his new mother, but as he grew taller, he found standing for his dinner inconvenient. It was then necessary for him to take a kneeling position. He soon outgrew that position, too, and so, not to be outdone, he would lie down to snack."
The cow and the elk, when separated, communicated, the cow mooing and the elk answering in his peculiar whistling voice. The children called their pet Wapiti, which in the native language meant elk. Wapiti was very gentle and even allowed the children to ride him. He seemed to genuinely love the children as much as they loved him. In time, the elk grew horns, and then, once in a while, he chased the children when they tried to bring in the cows. The day finally came when George Gould thought the 3-year-old elk was too dangerous to keep on the farm.
The day the Wapiti left was sad for us children. Our last moments with him were spent sobbing. We cut a bit of his hair off of him for a keepsake, and then Father led him away. He took the Wapiti to the Umpqua Valley and traded him for a horse.
Paul and Babe. Paul Bunyan, the giant lumberjack, and his faithful companion Babe, the blue ox, were folk heroes of the Great Lakes states. The first story about Paul Bunyan appeared in the Detroit News in 1910. From this beginning, the legend grew, with loggers inventing exploits and telling tall tales in logging camps throughout the region. It was said that after the timber was harvested in the Great Lakes, Paul and Babe moved on to the Northwest. According to logging lore, Paul happened to drag his peavey along the ground, and that created the Columbia Gorge. Another story claimed Paul felled trees by swinging a 3-mile-long crosscut saw, the same one he used to comb his hair, to mow down whole sections of the forest. One old-time logger once told this tale.
"Well, Paul and Babe was driving logs when they jammed at a narrow part of the river. And logs is piled 500 feet deep and backed up 10 miles. Paul brought Babe round to the head of the jam. He positioned the ox just so, and then he got off to one side and brought out his rifle, the 30-30 Winchester, and fired at Babe's backside. But Babe, thinking flies was stinging him, began switching his tail. The wind created by the switching pushed the logs back upstream, and that freed the jam."
When the forests of the great Pacific Northwest had been tamed, it was claimed that Paul and Babe moved on, and that today they live somewhere in the Alaskan bush. Drifting. Lying in tall grass, watching clouds drift overhead, white, fluffy, soft-edged, darker in the middle. One cloud overruns the sun, and for a shivering moment sun dims to dusk, but the clouds can never extinguish the fire that burns up there beyond the reach of Earth's long orbit. It seems to me that sunlight and shadow are the same, intangibles like happiness and heartache, pleasure and pain. The Prairie Schooner. Some ordered their Prairie Schooners brand new from the factory. Others simply had the local blacksmith make the necessary adjustments on the farm wagon. The Conestoga wagon, which originated in Pennsylvania in the mid-1700s, was a popular prairie schooner. It was big and roomy, but it was also heavy. And for that reason, many emigrant guidebooks recommended the Yankee wagon for traveling the Oregon Trail. The Yankee was made of well-seasoned, close-grained oak and could be purchased for about $200. Families heading west spent many days readying their wagons, filling them with everything they could possibly need for a 5-month journey. When packing was completed, a canvas cover was stretched over the top. If the pioneers followed the advice of experienced guides, the coverings were always doubled to provide greater protection against the weather. A wagon was worthless unless it had good wheels, and Joel Palmer, who led many wagon trains westward, suggested,
"Wagon wheels should be at least 1 3/4 inches wide. 3 inches would be best of all for crossing the oftentimes loose, sandy roads. The rims should be, at the minimum, 3/4 of an inch thick and fastened to the felloes with bolts rather than nails. Hub boxes should be at least 4 inches thick."
If the Prairie Schooner were well-seasoned and well-made, and the oxen faithful and strong, the pioneers had a fighting chance to reach their destinations with a wagon that could be used for chores and transportation on their new farms in the West. Poor Billy. The Thomas family, including 9 children, crossed the plains by wagon in 1851. At the summit of the Blue Mountains in Oregon, they laid over a day at Emigrant Springs to rest the stock. The men worked on the wagons, making necessary repairs and tightening the wheel rims in anticipation of the long descent to the rocky Columbia Plateau. The women made bread as they waited for the big tubs of wash water to heat over the open fires. The children ran around yelling and playing a game of tag. Nancy Thomas spread a quilt in the sunshine and laid her youngest child, 1-year-old Billy, on it. She busied herself kneading dough, occasionally glancing from her work, as mothers will do, to check on little Billy. Her private thoughts were interrupted by a scream from one of the women. Nancy instinctively looked towards Billy and was terrified to see a mountain lion standing over the quilt. The cat opened its mouth, scooped up Billy, and bounded away. The men grabbed their rifles and gave chase. At the entrance to a cave, the cat dropped Billy and turned to face its pursuers. The mountain lion, which proved to be a female with 2 kittens in the cave, was shot. Billy was safe. Although his clothing had been torn and there were teeth marks in his soft skin, he never even cried. In later years, Bill Thomas became district judge of Wrangell, Alaska. You've been listening to Writing the West. The stories and poetry in this podcast are by Rick Stieber and appear in books by him. Log on to www.rickstieberauthor.com to find out more. This program was produced by Michael Messner by permission of the author. Special thanks to Michael Tucker, Rachel Pulliam, and Art Schingler. Thank you for listening.